Sarita, welcome back. Brendon, welcome to the show. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Great to be back.
We are excited. You are our first live full episode here, guys, so no pressure.
No pressure.
Put on a collared shirt for this thing.
And it's not plaid.
Yeah, I was told I could not wear plaid, so had to call the wife and make sure we had one of these. All right. So, Brendon, a lot of our listeners are, in the shoes where you were 6 months ago, looking for that first house hack. Inventory's tight. I can't wait to unveil the story. There's a lot of good to talk about, but let's take a step back. Why were you even looking at real estate? Why was this even on the radar for you?
So I have been a lender for over 7 years now, and our niche is multi-units, and it's something I've always helped our buyers with and whatnot. And myself, I haven't really had the capital or funds to really kind of, put 10, 15, 20% down. And sure enough, Fannie Freddie came out and said 5% down's a thing. And I'm like, this is my time.
Yep. All right. So before that, there's FHA. What was, we had a 3.5% down program. Why was that not in the cards for you?
Yeah. So me and my wife, when we bought a condo, and looking back on it, I really wish we would have done the multi-unit because it just would have been such a smart idea, but we weren't ready to take the plunge yet. I hadn't been in the industry all that long. I hadn't really known what to do. So, we'd already had a condo, and we probably couldn't qualify with the new place as well as the condo without selling it. We really didn't want to sell it.
Got it. Where's the condo at?
Condo is in Irving Park, right off Elston and Irving.
All right, by Alps.
Literally, right next to Alps.
Oh, love the place. For our listeners, we'll link to that in the show notes for our listeners.
Yeah, sure.
What were you not prepared for in hindsight when?
I would say mentally just not prepared. I've helped plenty of people with that, dream of theirs to either own a multi-unit or start investing in real estate. But it's kind of, as a lender, I know how all the numbers work and I know how the financing side works, but just taking that plunge is kind of a difficult thing to get over mentally. Again, having, enough funds to do it is a thing too, right? I'm sure you guys know, but a lot of people think put 20, 25% down. It's not always the case. Many people don't know about these 10% programs or whatnot, but now with this 5% program, it just opens the door a lot more.
Yep.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that a little bit, there's so many hats that an owner has to wear, especially if you're going to manage your own properties as well. And so we sometimes see buyers who are really strong at either the numbers, or maybe they're really great handymen, but then they're bad at the numbers, or vice versa. So, especially when you're first getting started, that can be the biggest hurdle that people have to overcome is, whatever area they're not strongest in, getting confident in what their abilities can be in that.
Yeah, like anything in life, if you've never done it before, it's confusing. You just don't know the next step. The next step might not be that hard, but you don't know the next step. So therefore, it's challenging, or at least it's perceived as challenging.
Absolutely.
Then you do it once, twice, thrice, and the world gets a lot easier for you.
Well, the worst things is not knowing what you don't know.
Or yeah, how deep is this well? When we started the podcast and we didn't know how to set it up, and we were we don't even know what questions to ask. What is the next thing that we get blindsided by?
Even just setting it up. Any new thing, I think so many people get held up by, I don't know what I don't know, so I'm going to do nothing.
Yes.
At least you did something here. So that was a great...
Paralysis is definitely a real thing. People get caught up in should I do it? Should I not do it? And it's difficult to kind of take that plunge, I think. And, like you mentioned, not doing anything is usually what most people do.
You bought a condo though, so that was a good step, at least in the right direction.
We were confident enough for the condo. We were mentally prepared and undertaking all that. So I only rented one time in my life.
That's awesome.
When you bought the condo, did you consider holding on to it and renting it out afterwards? Did you run your numbers as you were going to hold on to it?
Did.
What was your mindset then?
Yeah, 100%. So when buying this place, the plan was always to rent out our place on Monticello. The rate is too good to give up, really, and it cash flowed. So it's kind of a no-brainer for us. Yeah.
Cool. All right, so 5% comes down. All of a sudden, buying a 3-unit becomes much more realistic to you. You engage Sarita. Talk about just the search here. All of a sudden in your head is, hey, I can do this. Walk us through this.
Yeah. So like many people, I've been seeing what's going on in the market and things like that. And this is, between October and now, it feels like, rates were on the rise. A lot of people were scared of, what was going to happen. And for me, I was like, this is an opportunity. While others are sitting on the sidelines, I'm going to be proactive and look for a place because, come April, May, June, there's going to be, and when rates come down, there's going to be a lot more buyers on the that were on the fences looking to buy, and it's just going to be a lot tougher market to get into. So I kind of wanted to take advantage of this off-season period.
What was the time frame? Just so we're on the same page here. Is this last fall when you started looking, or?
I mean, I think in like October, and then we were under contract by November. So it was
So
a quick
October,
turnaround.
October
It was
2023.
fast,
And
yeah.
when did the program come out?
It came out it was officially released in November, mid-November, but we knew about it from basically like the end of September. So literally the second I heard about the program, I was like, okay, I'm off the fence. I'm doing this.
So you're saying that the program got you off the fence?
It did, 100%.
Would you think it would have been done anything by now if it was for the program?
If it wasn't for 5% down,
It sounds like I'm promoting the program, but we are kind
If
of,
it,
but we're
wasn't,
not. At
if
the
it
same
wasn't
time.
for 5% down, I wouldn't have bought 100%.
Is it just because you would have had to put more down, or like
Yeah,
go a little deeper on that?
capital was a thing. I only had so much saved up and only had as much, funds to put towards a new purchase. Some of the other portfolio options weren't as attractive in terms of rate and financing and things like that. And then, in general, it's just difficult to get in when, for me, for example, this program allows you to get gift funds and things like that. So for those that don't have the ability to, maybe have all that saved up right away if they're younger like me, right? Getting a gift from your parents is definitely something that can set you up long term.
I don't want to side note the show too much, but gift funds is something that a lot of people don't talk about, don't realize it till they're actually in it. Can you maybe explain a little more? Because I know a lot of people are like, oh, my parents give me the money, but they don't realize what problem that creates.
Yeah,
once
walk
they're
us through the
under contract.
tactical steps here.
Yeah, what is gifting funds and why is it a trouble?
Yeah.
Why is it usually typically a problem for people?
So in general, for gift funds, on like the lending side, we have to source all large deposits, right? And
What, large deposit being over what?
large deposit is going to be anything over 50% of your qualifying income. So if you make, let's say, $10,000 gross, any deposit over $5,000 is going to be considered a deposit that needs to be sourced and funded. So if you transferred money from your brokerage account into your checking account and it's over $5,000, we're going to need the brokerage account, right?
Yep.
And same thing for a gift, right? So if you don't have the funds, but you say, hey, my mom and dad or whoever family member is able to help out with the down payment and closing costs. When they send the funds over, that's going to show up as a large deposit. And all they really need to do is, write a gift letter saying, hey, there's no expectation of repayment.
Yep. I remember when I bought my personal residence, this was a complete, I don't want to say disaster, but just a clusterfuck of paperwork because you can imagine, that year we probably flipped like a dozen homes, right? Like, and just money coming in, money coming out. Once I had something going to my personal account from that checking account, they had access to that checking account. And it was like, no joke, dozens of letters of explanations of where is this all coming from?
100%.
Is the
So
loophole?
be careful. I guess like if you're in that boat where you have the LLC and the personal, just realize like once you do that, like it's not bad. You're just creating a lot of paperwork.
Is the loophole only gifting $4,500 at a time? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, if there's multiple deposits, it's underwriting is definitely going to take a look at it and say, if it's coming from the same person, it's going to be flagged to a degree. So layering it in, or if you don't want to go through the process of documenting, you can always gift the funds in advance and then let the funds season, which means you just need to have the funds in your account for about 120 days.
Okay, so that's a good tip there. So if you're not doing that, this newer loan, then as long as if mom and dad give you money, they just have to give it to 4, 5, 6 months out. It sits in your account and it probably won't even be tracked at that point.
Exactly.
Seasoned.
Gotcha. How far are they going back when they're looking at your statements?
Usually, underwriting requests 2 months of statements. So, in some instances, it can be a tad longer, but as long as the, 2 of those bank statements don't have that large deposit on it, it shouldn't be questioned. So around, above 60 days, but if you're planning and prepping, I would probably, try to get the funds in 90 to 120 days.
And people that are getting commissions, bonuses, maybe side gig work, they just have to basically trace that back to whatever the source is.
Yeah,
That's
100%. Payroll and all that stuff, when you see it on your bank statements and whatnot, it shows the payroll. If it's from XYZ company, it's going to show that in your bank account, right? So things like that are easier to source. It's the oddball. Here's a $10,000 deposit. What is that for?
Those are nice though.
those are nice.
So, and if that spurred any more questions for those listening, you can reach out to Fairway Independent Mortgage. We'll link to them in the show notes. So yeah, nice to have a lender on the show here.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the search. So you're familiar with Irving Park. You got your condo there. This now becomes a reality. where was the buy box? Talk about some of the neighborhoods you were looking at. We have, our number, like, hey, we got to be below this number, whatever it is, roughly. And then what else were you looking for? Like, what's some specifics, whether it be neighborhood, type of property, et cetera?
Yeah. So we were trying to stay in a similar area than we were because, some people look at this differently. For us, we were like, hey, this is a place we're going to live for 2, 3, 4 years. So this needs to meet certain criteria from us from a like living standpoint, right? It's got to check at least a few of those boxes the same way you would buy like a primary residence, like a condo or single family home. It needs to check a few of those boxes. So
you have to keep your wife happy.
yeah.
And I think for this one especially, so we definitely had 2 different entities that were involved, and one of my favorite things about having an opportunity to work with them was that they actually agreed on a lot of things. So sometimes when we take couples out, it's very hard to understand the different lifestyle that your budget and your search criteria can afford you. So for this particular case, I was really lucky to work with people that had a very good understanding of what kind of direction they wanted to take this in, and that it was more of a lifestyle house hack.
100%. So yeah, just to piggyback off that. So we were looking for things that, kept our life pretty much in the same realm, and then wanted to keep commutes and all those things pretty similar. So Irving Park, Avondale, Portage, things like that, even
A little Jefferson Park.
Little
in
Jefferson,
there. Yeah.
Wicker, like, things near the highway, relatively speaking.
Yeah, you're playing in my neck of the woods. Like,
It is.
so, all right. So this is wintertime, right? October, November. Like, it's getting where everyone's starting to say, okay, I'm waiting for spring. You
Yeah.
guys are out there actively looking. This property comes up on Dakin here, right in my backyard. I got
right
you.
in your
We were
backyard.
joking before, and I got you surrounded. I know exactly where this bad boy is. So it pops up. You guys go see it right away. Was there some sort of intuition of, ooh, let's try to make this work, or was it?
So we had seen probably 4 to 5 properties, all in like different levels of condition, some that needed a lot of work and maybe a couple that only needed a little bit of work. This one fell towards that line of only needed a little bit of work. And when me and my wife, even when we saw the listing online, we're like, this could work for us. It had a lot of the criteria, had 2 beds, had an office space, had a garage, had a yard in the back, things like that. Some luxuries, right? But also would meet the rental side as well. So yeah, in general, I think when we first saw the place live, we're like, kind of got that warm and fuzzy feeling. And that feeling is something that it's their gut telling you there's something about this place that you like, right?
And I think, sorry, just to jump in there on that, because you did mention only seeing 4 to 5 properties, and that's not the norm. So another wonderful thing about working with y'all was that because of your background in lending, you've been running the numbers on properties for years. So having that financial acumen behind you helps make these decisions faster. But we had also kind of started this with the intent of like, we're just looking for a bit. And then maybe the ideal timeline might have been like January to February, so that at least you get your condo to a better point of like a better rental market for that part of this, because you were going to keep the condo. So to find it so quickly and to have such a strong, instinct that this is going to be good, I think was what really affected, all of these, the decision making.
Yeah, it definitely all happened much quicker than I expected. And that's kind of the way real estate works sometimes. Sometimes it takes a long time, sometimes it takes a little time, but you just have to be ready when the time does come.
So let me paraphrase that. We say this a lot, know what you're looking for. So when you see the right deal, you jump all over it. So it probably came on the market. You guys looked at it pretty quick within a day or two, and you guys wrote off pretty quick.
Actually, this one had been on the market for a bit.
Okay.
So that was also intriguing. And it goes to, something that we talked about in our episode on escalation writers. If people are not pricing the property right, it has a way of going stale. And this cute little home had sat stale for months before they had slowly started price dropping it, but had now gotten it to a point where, okay, this is actually where it should have been priced when it originally went on the market. And they wasted a lot of market time. And because the building was completely vacant, I think a lot of buyers would have seen that as intimidating, especially for their first building. And if you have a condo, a lot of times too, they want that grace of having at least one unit rented. So you've got some initial, help coming in with the mortgage. This didn't have that. So it definitely did have a lot of risk. Buying right before Christmas, having a condo and the double mortgage of the multi-unit that you have 2 vacancies you have to fill right around the holidays. Like, I could see why a lot of buyers might have tapped out at that point, but the opportunity that was there was huge.
Yeah, there was a lot of question marks when we were buying it in terms of we've never rented out our place. We don't know what all that entails in terms of getting it on the market, showing it, pricing it outright, getting tenants in there, things of that nature. So luckily, we had done a lot of work to our place. And I think, for people looking to rent it, it seemed like a place that was, worth getting, right? So yeah, in general, the timing of everything was a little auspicious, but I think in general, everything's working out pretty well.
You bring up a topic that I think a lot of people aren't focused on, because right now, or call it for the last year, you have these either properties off the market in 7 days or it's on the market for 151 days. And a lot of people discount what you guys did here. And people just think a bunch of other people, a lot of people lose confidence. They're like, if a bunch of people smarter than me already looked at this and it was a good deal, but they're not. The other people that looked at it maybe weren't looking at the same price point or weren't looking at the same circumstance. So how much are you, maybe Sarita, this is a question for you. Like, how much are you focusing on that stale market for your clients?
That's the most interesting market for me. I mean, I bought my deal that had been on the market for 500 plus days. So I think that, you can let the market ride out to get to the right price, or you can just write your offer and shoot your shot. So with that, you have to ignore the timeline. You have to ignore that they had price reductions. Really what you need to do is run your comps and run your data like you were listing this today. If I had to list this today, what do I think the property would be valued at? And then you can create your offer around that. And I think that's also really helpful too, not that we necessarily wrote it like a lowball offer on your place, but on my place we did. So Brendon was also my lender on my deal. So there's a lot of back and forth on the two of us helping each other here. But when I wrote my offer on my place, because it had been on the market so long, I went to the agent and I said, hey, these are the comps. This is what it's worth. We can't, you're never going to get a deal that's where you want it to be because it's just not there. And similar to what happened with Brendon too, it's like they were really close to being at what the market value was, never hit the right timing, and then we came in and end of the year luck too. Owners want to be done with this stuff by the end of the year. So
yeah, I think towards the end of the year, if something has been sitting, that there's an opportunity there, especially if the seller's in a position where they're trying to get rid of the property sooner.
Oh yeah, so flipping houses, I've been on that. You don't control when, if you buy something today and cool, my rehab's gonna be done in November, that's a ticking time bomb. Or it's just okay, I'm holding this damn thing till the Super Bowl.
Yep.
Right? So every day that goes by, if you have hard money, you're losing hundreds of dollars a day, thousands a week. You feel that.
Absolutely.
I've been on the selling side. You feel that and say, and also there's also just what I would call seller fatigue, right? You've been sitting there, you're not getting offers, you're priced wrong. We see it all the time. At some point, they just throw up their hands and say, screw it, just get this thing done.
Absolutely.
And they might do that $50K price drop, but you might hit them before that. Right? Where they're going to do it anyways.
It's about to happen.
And they argue with you no, okay, well, show me a better offer. This is the best thing that you have on the table right now.
Yeah.
I love making offers November, December. I think,
deal season.
Yeah, it's a great time if you can find that right one where, hey, it's going to happen anyways. You just jump the gun.
Yeah.
And for his building, it was vacant. So it had been on the market for a bit. It's sitting stale and it's vacant. There's nobody living in it. That owner is just paying a mortgage. So it was very enticing, especially that time of the year, for the owner to take your offer.
Yeah, agreed.
Yep.
So you guys weren't up against any other offers in this scenario, right?
No, it didn't. At least it didn't sound like it at the time.
Yeah, not at that time. But I mean, and this is really where we had a lot of conversations. We knew that if this had waited until January, where it's after the holidays, after the the end of the year. People might have got their bonuses. They might have got a little Christmas holiday money. Buyers really come out at the beginning of the year with their New Year's resolutions, New Year, New You, and they go at things hard. And that's where I've been pretty much all of January in these multiple offer situations. If this had carried over to January, what would have happened is he would have dropped the price, relisted it as new, and we would have had another multiple offer situation in January.
Yeah.
But we got really lucky and very blessed that this had the timing of it had happened in a way that allowed you to pull the trigger on it quickly. But because of your experience, we didn't have any buyer's remorse on this, because it had happened so quick.
Yeah, and I think something that kind of goes under the table here is that at the time when we were submitting these offers, rates were almost around 8%. And while other people were kind of like running and scared, I was like, no, this is good because I know rates are going to come down at some point. It's not a matter of, when the exact terms I get in now. It's more so about how I can set it up later.
Yeah, can you swallow what's there now? And it goes back to earlier we were talking about just putting in the reps. So you've done it because you underwrite loans. But for most people, understanding, I hate when I go to a meetup and someone's sitting there and they're like, oh, what would you get for rent? They're like, well, I don't know. It's like, well, how the hell are you out there shopping? Like, how will you ever buy anything if you don't understand what a good deal looks like?
Right.
Right. If you don't put in the reps to understand that, you're never going to buy. So you have to put in those reps, right? However you want to do it, you need to understand what is a good deal. So when it comes, you can act confidently. If you can't act confidently, you're going to sit there and say, I don't know.
Right.
If you dropped me in the middle of Kansas City, I'd have no freaking idea. And someone handed me a deal, I'd have no idea if it was good or bad, right? And I would sit there and go, I don't know, not for me.
Yeah, you really got to just get out there. And, luckily with my background, I didn't have to go through the learning curve nearly as much, but anyone can really do it. It's just a matter of, kind of taking the plunge.
Well, your mindset was, is 8% is great, no one else is buying, and I know rates will come down. What does that really mean though? Is it, hey, if this goes down half a point, I can refi? Because everyone can do the same things that you're doing, you just look at it differently. So kind of explain a little more what your mindset was at the time of if I get 8% right now, it's not a big deal because it's going to come down to 6. If it goes down 2 points, it makes sense and I'll be able to refi. Tell me a little.
Yeah, so the 8% or rates near 8% at the time didn't scare me because I know that when rates come down, buyers are going to flood the market and home values are just going to go up. So now's the time to get the deal. But in terms of refinancing and things like that, I know more or less your scenario from when you purchased it needs to be in a similar position. So, job is the same. If it's you and your wife or partner, whoever, that are on the loan together, you guys have a similar scenario to what you did when you first purchased the home. So as long as everything's more or less stayed the same, then you should be able to refinance into a lower rate.
Yeah, one thing about this new program too, and you correct me if I'm wrong because you're the lender, you can refi at 95%. Is that accurate?
100%.
That's
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
That's absolutely bananas.
It's nuts.
Just walk us, let's walk through an example for our listeners. You can do a rehab, you can do whatever. You can do a refi up to 95% loan to value. Even with FHA, you have the purchase. We've always had the purchasing power, even though it's had its red tape and stuff. But
yep.
Then you're refining to 80% down. This is crazy. You can refi. Yeah.
Correct. You can do a rate and term refinance. I know a lot of people are always thinking cash out. Cash out's going to be a little bit different. It's going to have different loan to value requirements. But if you're just looking to lower the rate, save on the monthly payments and things like that, then on a multi-unit 5% down, you can still do up to 95%. So if you have some appreciation, you can even bump up the loan amount, cover some closing costs, things like that.
Yeah. So you're where you need to be careful. Housing prices drop for whatever reason, you are going to be stuck with your 8% rate. That's the risk or
like you're saying, you're changing jobs next year, or maybe your wife's going to decide to stay home.
Yeah, you need to live with these
changes.
certain risks here.
Correct. Yeah, if you're a W-2 employee and then you go 1099, all of a sudden now it's going to be different, right? So you need to keep that scenario relatively similar.
All right, so we got 2 vacant units.
2 vacant units.
And
yeah.
I see people go 1 of 2 ways. Either the guy goes down to the basement and maximizes rental income upstairs, or they take the nicer unit and they're just happy they have a second rental unit. Where'd you guys go with that?
So the quote unquote owner's unit was the first floor. So the second floor I think needed a little bit more work. So we ended up taking the second floor unit and we rehabbed both units a little bit. So, in general for us, we've always lived on not the first floor. So the second floor wasn't a big deal. I know some people.
The penthouse, baby.
You got the suite, right? Yeah. So we ended up taking the second floor and, it just because they're identical units. There really wasn't much different. We figured we could rent the bottom unit for a little bit more than we could ours. But in general, they're pretty similar.
I know a guy in in South Loop. He bought, or it was South Loop, I think it was Bronzeville or something, but he built a 3-flat and he had to argue with the post office to have unit PH for his top floor. So he had garden 1, 2, and he wanted a unit PH. Like,
Wow.
And it was actually in the papers and all that stuff, but the guy made a really big deal about it. He's like, dude, I could get 20, 30 grand more if I use that PH. I'm like, all right. You end up foreclosing the whole building. And it was before the crash, but that's people has just thought about that. So what would give me the breakdown of vacant unit if you rent them both? What would the rents been for both? Just so people can level set up.
In its current condition, each unit probably was going for around $1,900, I would say. At the moment, we're trying to rent it. We're actually still in the process of renting it. So around $2,100 is where we're looking after improvements.
So say you would have bought it just as investment and you put whatever you put into it. What would have what are the difference between the owner's unit and the penthouse?
Maybe $100 or so.
Yeah, it's
So it wasn't
usually
a
not,
big-
They were pretty similar.
It's not that much
Gotcha.
more, especially in these multi-units when things are so similar. The hard part is that actually a lot of times, especially in the condo market, you'll see the top floor, even though it's the top floor and you're living above everybody else. If it's a 3-story walk-up or even 2 stories, people don't like a lot of stairs.
Yeah.
So sometimes they're only renting just $100, sometimes $50 apart on these properties.
So I don't think we ever talked about this. Like, as a house hacker, where do you want to be? I'd rather, I guess, if I was house hacking, I'd rather have my people below me and not have to hear them above. Like, where's
No,
it?
I mean, I'm house hacking at 40, so I have the nicest unit in the building, the owner's unit, duplex up. I don't want to hear my tenants. If I had like international callers at till
so
2
you got
a.m.
you got your tenants behind you, below you, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to be living in the garden unit taking a call, at 1 a.m. and they're having a party on a Saturday
Running
night.
up to the first floor
Yeah,
because your reception's not as good.
Depends on your depends on your circumstances too. If you're like a younger person just out of college,
Yeah, man,
maybe
grind it
the
out.
garden unit is like
Yeah.
that's like you can live with that for a couple of years. It's not going to kill you.
It's your strategy, right? So like, where are you at in life? Do you have a family, but ultimately, if you can do a garden unit, especially if you're younger and single, that's a great place to start.
I think I'd want to do that too. That way, I guess, at that point, that way, if I'm having people over a game, like, for the same reason I was thinking I want to be above people, I wouldn't want to have people below me, I guess, in that sense. So,
There you go.
all right.
Yeah.
So it depends.
It
Is the
depends.
answer.
Yeah,
like
the-
most things in life, it depends.
Yeah, the lifestyle.
So let's talk a little about you put this under contract before we even get into owning the thing. You put it under contract. You were quote unquote not really expecting it to be, you were prepared, but you weren't prepared, right?
Yeah.
This happened very quickly. Were there those oh crap moments, right? Whether it be with inspection or just the own self-doubt that we all get when we buy something. Talk to us a little about that, because I know our listeners, if they've purchased something, they've gone through that. Was there a moment where you're like, should I do this? Will this happen, etc.?
Yeah, so I think after we actually got under contract and did the inspection, I think there were definitely some nights, some like relatively sleepless nights where you're thinking like, man, like what if this place doesn't rent out? Like what if like I have to make 2 mortgage payments, one that's double my previous one. Like you start thinking about all these like what if scenarios and like worst case scenarios, and it can be a little stressful, but I think you just have to kind of lead with your best foot forward and just realize that everyone that's in your shoes before has, gone through these same thoughts, right? And that for the most part, things work out decently. So as long as you have a good team around you who's able to support you kind of and help you through these things, like little by little, everything tends to work out at the end of the day.
So, and I also think it's about the management of that too. So we knew, okay, we're going to buy this really right before Christmas. It was just a few days before Christmas. And you can't start marketing these rents until you own it, but you can do all the prep work. So you can declutter your place, you can take photos, you can start the marketing so that the day that you get keys, you press send and hit, go live on all the listings so that everything is ready to go as quickly as you can. You also have to have a pricing strategy for the season. So we can't get, $3,000 for your condo if we're trying to rent it like January 1. So we were really strategic about the numbers to make sure that they made sense and that it didn't sit so long. And we also sent out, I know he had help in both directions. So Mike Facchini also helps you out a lot with tenant screening and questions and all of that stuff. And then we had all of our marketing. So he was really lucky that he had all the tools that he needed and was doing it in a time that managed the timeline of those leases.
Yeah, having a few people that you can lean on when you have a lack of experience is definitely part of the process in general. For those that kind of try to do it on their own, it's hard to go through all the trials and tribulations. You need people you can kind of lean on a little bit to help you through this kind of stuff.
Mike Facchini, episode 238. So
238. But I'm so sorry. Just tell them how it turned out though with the condo.
It turned out great. We ended up renting it for $2,450 to a really nice couple, young couple, and they moved in February 1st. So the mortgage is covered. A lot of fear and anxiety, washes away as soon as you get a security deposit and a first month's rent, stuff like that.
And it was very quick too.
It was pretty quick. Yeah, I think we ended up listing in like mid-December-ish, and then I think it was leased by probably the first week of January, give or take.
I think that's such a huge win. Sorry, I had to interrupt because that's such a I think a lot of buyers have fear and anxiety about that timeline and that time of the year, and that was the best case scenario.
Yeah.
And simple tip, but just for our newer listeners out there, let's say you get in that situation, January, February, you nail it, you get that tenant, you don't need to do a 12-month lease. You can do the 14-month lease. You can do 6. You can line them up.
We
line them up for the spring.
We did a 15-month lease. Yeah.
Yeah. Line it up. You go through that. You go through that scenario one time. Yeah. Right. You don't set yourself up to go through it again next year.
100%.
You get it in the spring. You tell them, hey, you'll have more options. It's better for everybody. You don't set yourself up to go through the same pain again.
100%. Yeah. So when I was thinking about the lease, that was 100% part of the strategy. So, like you said, don't want to be renting again in January, February. Do a longer lease. If you have to discount it a little bit, do it. It's worth it.
But you collect a security deposit. That scares me.
Huh?
That scares me.
Does that scare you?
Oh yeah, for sure. Shay from our office right now, he's got a place over in West Town by you, and he's contemplating it. And I'm trying to do everything to talk him out of it. So
they don't scare me that much, especially if you have if you're someone who has 10 units or 3 units. I think it's very manageable.
Everyone north of Roosevelt has the mindset of, it's okay, I'll follow the rules. And that's how I had that same mindset 20 years ago. But all it takes is that there's no
forgiveness.
There's no time of correction. So tenant can move out, and you could say, $150, I'm going to hold back for the carpet cleaning because it's just the right thing. And I had to do that one time when I rented or whatever, and you do it. And you might never hear from that tenant again, but you get a letter from the attorney. And that letter right away, once you get that letter from an attorney, you're in court, and you're pretty much jammed up 3 months plus attorney fees. It doesn't happen as much on the north side. That's why a lot of people aren't as nervous, but there's always that risk there. So
yeah, and he's a finance guy, so typically I don't recommend that any of my clients do that. But because of his background and because he's so meticulous with the numbers and following the rules,
20 years ago, I'm like, it doesn't matter. I'll follow the rules. I'll handle it all. I'm not even going to delegate this to anyone on my team. I'm going to do it all. And that mindset. Yeah, it's everyone.
It's always a risk.
It's a risk. So
on a purchase like this, I don't think it's as big of a risk. I think the biggest way to get burned is when you buy a building. So let's say this theoretical example, this unit had tenants in it, had security deposits. The seller had not paid the interest. That goes on to you now, right? Unless you make it clean at the closing, you're inheriting his mistakes from years past. That's what scares me the most. If it's your tenant, you're doing it right.
But you can
it's
also
very
have
easily.
the security deposit returned then
Correct.
too.
Yeah. Correct. Just return it, call it a day, and be done.
Yeah.
I told Shay, and I give people this advice, is you could take the security deposit, but where you have to work, if you have the rapport with the resident, it's not as big of a deal because they're not going to want to screw you, right? So as long as you have a good rapport, you're living in the same building, or you're treating them fair, and you're doing right by them, the risk goes down. But that's where the effort goes up. So security deposit goes up. Effort for just the rapport has to go up as well too. So as long as you remain that rapport and keep the mindset of I'll make sure they don't want to screw me, then the risk definitely goes 100%. Down. But here, I want to go back to one thing you said. Buyer's remorse is a real thing when it comes to getting that contract signed. And it's even worse that it's I have 5 business days I get back out of this. It's almost
it plants it in your head.
It plants in your head oh my gosh. So I just, to anyone listening, and I imagine, I know you're good at this talking to your buyer clients, but that's 72 hours after you get that offer accepted, the doubts that go through your head, the fears is real. And that is almost a period that is probably most scary for anyone that's never done it before. But even 40 deals, 100 deals in it, you still think about it.
What am I missing?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. What am I missing? How did I get this deal? I shouldn't have got this deal. Did I miss something? Yeah.
I mean, we were talking a little bit about our relationship, but last year when I was buying, I think we had several calls together.
Several, 100%.
I cried less on your deal than I did on mine. But, it was a lot of like, when you're in a different seat of this and in the transaction, it's easier to be the driver on this. But when you're in the passenger seat and you're trying to make the decisions and you're kind of like side seat driving your own deal, I wanted to make sure, at least on my numbers, that I was really clear and I wasn't overlooking anything, because I had such an emotional response to my transaction and my deal. Also, I say this a lot, and I'm sure my clients are like, you got to get some new material. But if my ship sinks, nobody's coming to save me. So I think about the numbers much more. I scrutinize them more on my deals and my clients' deals, because, I have that fear of, I finally have worked really hard for something, and now what if it's taken away from me? And I've made mistakes that have gotten me to that point. So, I think it goes back to having a good team and having people that you can like conference in, that you can talk to, that aren't bros, that, can really have a high sense of EQ. Because I know a lot of the guys that are out there too, even my guys that are really number driven, you still need somebody that is going to be and have that compassionate element of understanding what your nerves and what this really means for you. And if you don't have that side of whomever you're working with, you're going to be out there, more worried than you need to be about these things.
Yep. So I know this is all fresh still, but going through the process, owning now, how has this made you a better investor? And fair question, what would you have done differently? Sounds like everything's turned out well here. But if we replay the scenario again 6 months, what's maybe something you've learned where it's like, okay, now I'm prepared for X?
Yeah, that's a good question. So hard to exactly touch on that point, but like in terms of what's made me a better investor, it's just kind of understanding all the little things that go into like a place when you buy it. When you finally live there, right? And this is actually, I think, really helpful for house hacking, is you're living there. You are in the property. You understand what's working and what's not working. At the same time, because of that, you realize, okay, look at all this stuff that needs to be fixed. An inspection gets you from point A to point B, but once you live there and once you start actually understanding, what's broken, what's not, you're like, okay, shoot, these numbers are starting to add up quickly. So always, I think people don't realize they need to plan. They're probably going to spend more after the fact than, on little minor repairs than what they originally anticipated.
Yeah, the stuff that drives you crazy. And I mean, I'm guilty of that too. I know you were talking about lighting, that you had, lighting was never on the table. It was never something that we talked about. And then you told me that you updated some of the lighting, and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Didn't foresee that.
Yeah. When we first walked the property, it was in so much daylight, and you're like, man, this is so great. And then you go to the property at night, and lamps do so much, but like you're like, this place is dark, and you're like, man, are tenants gonna like this? Are they gonna see the property for what it is? And I'm like, honestly, I need to live in the light. We're gonna do some can lights. I know it's a little expensive, but the property's vacant. We're gonna do it once and be done with it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Great add value.
rehabbers that won't put blinds in, or new construction, you definitely get blinds. So a lot of people are always thinking, I got this 100% rehabbed house, or it's brand new construction.
Yeah,
and they get blinds.
$2,500.
Yeah, $2,500, $3,000 worth of blinds. Like that's something I always see people get blindsided by.
Good pun.
Blindsided. Oh, I didn't even read that. I did not.
Lance, title of the episode. Write it down.
Blindsided.
So, all right. So what's next? Right, we got this one. We're gonna get this humming. Are you back on the march then? Once you save enough capital, is this the train moves forward?
I think it's tough because right now the bottom unit is still not rented, so that I think is priority number one, right? Mm-hmm. And as I think the plan is trying to get a tenant in there for March. I think that's probably pretty realistic at this point, but.
And it's a 3-1 in Portage?
It's a 2-unit in Portage.
No, the bed bath.
Oh, it's 2 bed, 1 bath, and there's like a nice flex den space, I would say.
Cool.
That we use as an office, which is great. But yeah, so we're trying to get that rented, but I think we're trying to see how everything settles in the next 6 months or so with finances and whatnot. But it was tough convincing my wife the first time to move, and after moving fees are definitely a big thing. So I don't know when the next one is, but hopefully there is another one.
Oh, and I'm sorry, you mentioned your wife. We should actually talk about her for a second. So she has a real estate background as well, and I think that helped a lot with this transaction. Is that I had 2 buyers that had different backgrounds in this that were coming together to purchase, and her like insight in all of this made such a big difference.
Yep. Yeah. Her,
So-
her dad was a real estate agent her whole life. She worked at a bank for, 3 or 4 years, and now she works at a law firm at Vetter Price as a paralegal, and she just sees how these deals kind of come together and things like that. So I think that made her more comfortable with it. And to be honest, when we bought our condo, she was the first one that was like, we should buy. And I was a lender at the time, and I'm like, I was a little hesitant of it. You know what I mean? Usually it's the opposite, right? So I knew we could get the deal done and things like that, but she was the kind of the driver of like, let's not rent.
What is going through this process? I believe you're one of the first people in the entire country that did the 5%.
I want to say,
It's gotta be one of the first.
I think we need to just say he is, and that if somebody was using
So
FHA and they
we'll
flipped,
say you were the first person, and if anyone wants to challenge it,
Yeah,
bring it on.
come find me.
I love
kinda-
it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're the first person to do this crazy new loan program in the country,
BBEC's cringing right now.
and you went through it, and one of the products that you and your job in doing financing or loans is to push the same product. What do you feel? Talked about, you went through it. A lot of lenders are pushing that 5% right now that have not gone through it. Like, how has it made you a better lender in that sense?
Yeah, so the 5% program was once upon a time a thing, right? So we had Home Possible
Rest
back
in
around
peace,
2018, and the sweet spot was finding like those no income limit areas, and that's kind of how you had to sell it back then. Now there's no like geographic area or restrictions on it. So, really for those of the people that were kind of sitting on the fence because they didn't have enough saved up or they didn't have enough capital, things like that, it's been a great, not only a great talking point, but it's just a great way for people to, and I think it's doing what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac wanted. It's getting more people into the game, and as well as having a little bit more like affordable housing. Thank you.
yeah, sorry.
Did you say homing?
You look good.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Homing.
Homing.
Well,
Did you
Making up
now
things.
with the 5%? Now, can you go buy another house hack and use that? What's the rule around how many times you could use it? How does that work?
So there's no rule on how many times you can use. So when you buy the home, it just has to be a primary residence. And when you buy any primary residence, the idea is that you're going to live there for about a year, right? Now, if you live there for a little less than a year because of circumstances in your life, that happens, right? So usually about a year, and then you can start looking for the next one if you're looking for a primary.
Good stuff. All right. You ready to wrap?
Ready to wrap?
Let's do it.
All right, Brendon, what is your competitive advantage? How have you been able to do this while so many other people wish they could?
I think my competitive advantage is that I had that lending background side. So I knew, sometimes most people are going through this whole process and they're like, I don't even know if I qualify for all these things. Whereas me, I knew exactly where the numbers needed to be for us to qualify without having to rent our place out beforehand and things like that. So I think that was one of the big things that kind of set me apart is I knew where all the numbers stood. So I knew exactly where I could, what price points I was looking at.
I call him my numbers guy. Whenever I'm introducing anybody to Team Facchini, I'm always like, yeah, you got to talk to Brendon. He's my numbers guy. Like, he will get you set up for this.
It's such an interesting thing because the numbers change so much. If it's a 2 unit, a 4 unit, the taxes, the area, it's difficult. So like it does become, depending on your scenario, case by case to a degree.
Yeah. And especially the client's own debt to income ratio. So that is also something that I know Realtor.com, Redfin, they all have these like mortgage calculators, but most of the time, like they're not really analyzing the back end of the deal.
Yep.
Good stuff. All right. You're freshly through it. Give us one piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first property here in Chicago.
That's a good question. So one piece of advice is that if right now is kind of like the golden opportunity to buy because, even last week rates went up a little bit, right? There's still people that are on the sidelines and people similar to like COVID, right? People that bought homes before COVID and then got to refinance in these low rates, the people that didn't buy were kicking themselves. This is that same opportunity now where if not saying you need to buy right now, but for those that are willing to kind of take that plunge right now, they're going to pay dividends in comparison.
What do you do for fun?
I'm a big golfer. I got the Brendon
I
Dunes.
saw the Brendon Dunes polo there, man.
I got the Brendon Dunes polo. Yeah, so I'm a big golfer. So when I can try to get away, I try to get on the course. Try not to think about too many things going on in life, and it's a good way to decompress, good way to make memories, and have a good time with friends and things like that.
Love it. All right, give us a good book, podcast, or self-development activity you'd recommend to our listeners.
Yeah, the book I've been reading right now I'm between a few books. The book that I usually come back to is Millionaire Next Door.
Yep.
I know it's really cliche, I know. But it's fascinating to me because people's spending habits is probably the number one thing that kind of sets you up for later in life. And it's amazing to see that so many of the people, that are where you want to be in life are just doing things way differently than social media portrays it, right? You see everyone spending money on new cars, all these things you don't necessarily need, and keeping up with the Joneses. And that book just kind of reminds me, like, you don't need all these things.
I had to have a talk with my son yesterday about why I have a 2018 Honda Civic.
Well, didn't David Green said he still has like the same Toyota Camry?
Yeah,
Right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah, my car's paid off, and like it's an asset because of that.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Besides yourself, name one resource you'd recommend to other Chicago investors.
Besides myself,
can't say Sarita either. She's next to
no,
you.
you can't. Bigger Pockets obviously is a good resource. There's lots of tools and resources on there for you to kind of start dipping your toes in there. Where you maybe get off the the fence of buying and things like that. So there's different strategies, Burr, all those things, and this kind of has tools for you to kind of research and do some digging on your own, I think. But yeah, if you're kind of just trying to get your feet wet, looking around on Bigger Pockets is definitely a good start.
Well, I'm going to push you a little. We'll give us someone else on the team. So we know we have Fairway Independent Mortgage, we have Sarita, either attorney, inspector, who's someone. Give us a person you would recommend.
Yeah. On the inspection side, so I had my inspector Ken, and I can't think of his last name right now.
Alexander.
Thank you so much. He is a wonderful inspector. He, especially on the multi-unit side.
Yeah, he's like my go-to on multi-units.
We'll link to him in the show notes. Always, people are always looking for that.
Yep.
Perfect. Cool. All right, Brendon, thank you so much. You provide a ton of value on this episode. Really love you just talking about everything. How can our listeners learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
You can follow me on Instagram, Bigger Pockets, or, I really just enjoy connecting with people. So if you just want to give me a call and talk about your lending options, Fairway Independent Mortgage, be happy to discuss anything that you might have.
All right. We got 4 people sitting here for the Chicago Facts, so I feel like we should get this. I made it a little harder for you. Mark, is there anyone we're playing for, and who's our sponsor?
Yep, we're playing for Gwen Brewster. So she bought a T-shirt off of straightupchicagoinvestor.com merch store. And Gwen, if we get this question right, you get a $50 gift card brought to you by Movers Chicago.
We mentioned moving fees earlier. They're
they came to our meetup.
Yeah, they're all over the place now.
Yeah,
a good resource for investors to know. All right, so we mentioned you're in Portage Park. Your property's on Dakin, so right in my neck of the woods there. So I don't know, this is gonna be a little tricky, but there's 3 of you. So Dakin is named after R.L. Dakin. He's an early Chicagoan, and he made his fortune by, and here's your 4 options. He was a railroad tycoon, a financial backer of Nikola Tesla, a Chicago real estate investor, or an executive at the Union Stockyard and Transit Company. How did he make his fortune?
D.
I was leaning towards a D as well.
Yeah, I would say D.
Guys, you know how most millionaires are made?
Real estate.
He's a real estate investor.
You know what? I thought that might be tricky, and so I was like, no, it can't be that because it's too obvious. Yeah.
That's why it was great.
I wanted the Tesla answer. I was like, that's very topical right now. So that was interesting.
That was a good one, Tom.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, good
That
one.
little side note to geek out on Portage Park, that little strip you have there is hilarious because you have like where Linder and Lockwood, the 2 north-south running streets there, the grid doesn't match up.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, you got to go like that
we got
half
stuff
block.
right
Those
there. Yep.
those 4-way intersections suck.
Yeah.
See, I remember driving there as like a teenager. Like those are dangerous.
Yeah. All right, Gwen, we'll put your name back in the hat to get drawn again for a future Chicago Fact. Thank you to our sponsor,
I'm sorry,
Movers.
Gwen.
Yeah, we didn't do what we normally do. We could have hedged it and all went through different, and we had a 75%
yeah.
chance.
You guys
We
are
should've-
so confident. I didn't want to be
yeah.
like, are you sure?
Yeah, I said it so fast too. I was like, oh, sorry, Gwen.
One with the gut.
All right, Brendon, Sarita, thank you for coming on here. Tom, thank you as always. Listeners, go to straightupchicagoinvestor.com. Check out our meetups. So we have over 25 meetups in there. It's getting nicer out. Things are starting to be outdoor. Check out. Also, we have advertising for upcoming events here that are sponsored here or put on by Straight Up Chicago Investors. So looking forward to seeing you guys all out there. Thank you guys all. And listeners, we'll see you next week.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.